Daniel Ricciardo's dreams of returning to the Red Bull seat seem to be slipping away. He made the move back to AlphaTauri last year, hoping it would be his ticket back to the big leagues. But here's the harsh truth. His recent performances haven't lived up to the hype. To add insult to injury, he's even been outshone by Yuki Tsunoda. Can Ricciardo bounce back from this slump and prove the doubters wrong? The clock is ticking. Daniel Ricciardo has been open about his main goal in continuing to race in Formula One's midfield, to impress Red Bull and potentially return to the position he left over 5 years ago. Last year, he began this journey by showcasing his skills on Red Bull Simulator and ultimately replacing struggling rookie Nick de Vries. However, his progress was hindered by a crash at Zandvoort, causing him to miss 5 races. Thus, 2024 was seen as the real beginning of his quest to become Max Verstappen's teammate once again. Unfortunately, this year got off to a rocky start for Ricciardo. Yuki Tsunoda isn't being seriously considered for a future Red Bull seat, which means Ricciardo needs to outperform him this year to have a chance. However, across the first 2 weekends of racing, Tsunoda has been performing better than Ricciardo. In qualifying, Tsunoda leads 2-0. In Bahrain, Tsunoda narrowly missed out on Q3 by just 0.007 seconds, while Ricciardo qualified 14th, trailing by almost a tenth and a half. Then in Jeddah, Tsunoda made it into Q3 for the first time this year and was 0.4 faster than Ricciardo. Although Ricciardo finished ahead of Tsunoda in Bahrain, it was only because of a team order that allowed him to pass. This situation arose due to a strategy error that dropped Tsunoda behind Kevin Magnussen's Haas, leaving him just ahead of Ricciardo, who was on softer tyres. In Jeddah, Ricciardo faced more bad luck with a slow pit stop, lasting around 40 seconds. However, by that time, he was already trailing several positions behind Tsunoda, who was in contention for points until hindered by Magnussen's strategic tactics. Ricciardo found himself stuck at the back of the pack and couldn't make any headway. Instead, he ended up spinning out of turn 1 all on his own. Interestingly, this happened right in front of Sergio Perez, the very driver Ricciardo aims to replace at Red Bull, who was about to lap him. So what exactly has caused all these setbacks for Ricciardo? Ricciardo seems to view his disappointment in the first 2 race weekends differently. He acknowledges that he didn't perform as well as he could have in Bahrain qualifying, admitting he could have done better by finding an extra 0.2 to make it into Q3. He takes responsibility for not fully maximizing his performance during that weekend. However, in Jeddah, Ricciardo felt like it was more the car's limitations that held him back. He described the 3 days there as painful, expressing that something wasn't quite right with his car, known as VKB01. After the race, Ricciardo explained, "We discovered a few issues with the car that were affecting its performance. It seemed like certain things weren't working as efficiently as they should have been, causing some flaws in how the car operated." During qualifying in Jeddah, Ricciardo sensed that the car had reached its maximum potential, while others continued to improve. He believed that even if they had more time to work on the car outside of the park firm regulations, they wouldn't be able to fix everything in just 24 hours. "I'm confident," Ricciardo added, "that the team will address these issues back at the factory and come back with a better performing car for the next race in Melbourne." Regarding the spin at the end of the race, Ricciardo joked about it, saying he didn't want the team to feel left out by being the only one to make a mistake. When asked if it happened because his concentration waned, Ricciardo replied that it could be a possibility. He admitted to taking too much curb, which caused the spin, although he didn't intend to do so. He speculated that perhaps a bit of frustration played a role, but emphasized that he wasn't trying to spin. Essentially, he acknowledged the mistake without making excuses, but also hinted at using it as motivation to improve. The situation where Ricciardo faces struggles with his car while his teammate seems to manage better might ring a bell. It's similar to his time at McLaren, where Lando Norris performed well, while Ricciardo found it challenging. However, Ricciardo insists that the competition with his teammates hasn't been entirely one-sided so far. When asked about Tsunoda's better performance in Jeddah qualifying, Ricciardo acknowledged Tsunoda's good job, but emphasized that they've been closely matched overall. He explained, "We both had our moments of strength and weakness. In qualifying, we seemed evenly matched initially, but while Tsunoda and others managed to improve their times, we struggled to keep up. Feeling frustrated being so far behind, especially when fighting for points, adds to the challenge." Although Ricciardo admits to some mistakes in the first race, he's confident in his potential lap time. However, looking at his current situation, he's not confident in the car's performance and where they could have reached with it. That's what's occupying his thoughts now. After just 2 races into the season, it's too early to make any firm conclusions, especially considering the unusual characteristics of the Jeddah track. Some drivers, like Lewis Hamilton, have struggled there compared to their teammates, so Ricciardo's hopes for a Red Bull comeback aren't in crisis. It's premature to compare this situation to his time at McLaren. We've seen Ricciardo's potential before, like in his impressive weekend in Mexico last year. However, he can't afford to continue this streak of poor performance. The driver market is unpredictable, and even top drivers like Verstappen could consider leaving their teams unexpectedly. Plus, Red Bull is known for making quick decisions, so Ricciardo needs to bounce back soon to secure his future in Formula One. It's common in Formula One for drivers to have limited time to improve, even for experienced favourites like Ricciardo. Helmut Marko, a key figure at Red Bull, seems to have already urged Ricciardo to pick up the pace in a recent post-race article on Red Bull's Speed Week website. Marko mentioned that Ricciardo needs to show improvement soon, especially after Tsunoda's strong performance in Jeddah qualifying. He also highlighted the impressive debut of Liam Lawson, who could be considered as the next driver for a Red Bull seat. This indicates the pressure on Ricciardo to step up his game, especially with other talented drivers waiting in the wings. Despite the pressure and uncertainty surrounding Red Bull, Ricciardo's mission remains the same: to prove himself as a reliable and consistent performer. He hasn't shown that yet in 2024, but he's determined to change that at his home race in Melbourne. "I'll forget about the Jeddah weekend and focus on pushing the team forward," he stated. "I stayed back after qualifying to help identify issues and ensure we're ready for Melbourne. The team wants success as much as I do, so I'll make sure we're well prepared." Ricciardo sees Melbourne as the start of his season and is eager to perform well. How he performs in these early races will determine where Red Bull places its trust in the future. It seems like Ricciardo has reached a point where his age might be affecting his performance in Formula One, just like it did for Vettel and Schumacher before him. As drivers get older, their reaction times can slow down, making it harder for them to push the car to its limits. This drop in performance isn't just about physical factors like aging, though. It could also be due to a lack of commitment or motivation. Even Lewis Hamilton, one of the greatest drivers of all time, might be experiencing this decline. That's why it's puzzling to see Ferrari showing interest in Hamilton. It might be more about marketing than actual on-track performance. Personally, I'd like to see some fresh faces in Formula One next year. It's time for new contenders to emerge. Speaking of team decisions, it's surprising that Red Bull hasn't brought back Albon. He's shown great improvement and can handle a difficult car well. Plus, having a Thai driver like Albon could be beneficial for the team's image. Red Bull seems to have shifted from their previous ruthless hiring and firing approach to being overly supportive of Perez. While Perez is a good support driver, Albon could potentially fulfill the same role. But let's give Ricciardo 4 more races to prove himself, and if he doesn't perform, Red Bull should replace him with Lawson. Nick de Vries, a rookie, was replaced after just 9 races, and Ricciardo hasn't done much better since. Helmut Marko is right. Ricciardo needs to improve, or it's time for someone new. I'm curious to see how Lawson would do against Tsunoda. And honestly, Ricciardo's excuses about the car remind me of his time at McLaren. He needs to step up his game, or there's no point in keeping him. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments below.